Hey everybody, it's Dana. Welcome back to my YouTube channel and blog. Today I'm going to be making a rather soft card using the new Ink on 3 Dogwood stamp set and matching dies. This stamp set has been released already on Ink on 3, and this is a sample card I made, but I wanted to go ahead and make a card with you guys as well. I love everything about this stamp set and the coordinating dies, so let's go ahead and get started. So I went ahead and I already put my image on my mini platform, but this image already had some black ink on it. So I want to make sure that this is nice and clean. So I'm using the Ink on 3 stamp cleaner as well as the matching purple rag. This has become like my favorite cleaner now in my stamp room because it really does get your stamps clean, and that purple towel is very absorbent. So as you can see, I have a perfectly clean stamp now. So now for my ink, I'm going to be using the Ink on 3 Juicy ink because I want to go ahead and heat emboss this. So I'm going to line everything up in my platform, and I'm going to use the anti-static tool to make sure that I don't have any residue of the embossing powder later. So I'm using that Juicy ink embossing pad, and I'm going to put that on my stamp, and then I'm going to go ahead and swing over my lid. Now I'm going to rub this down kind of hard because this is a watercolor paper. So it's going to have a little bit of a texture to it. So I want to make sure that I get a really good impression. So I'm going to use that Juicy ink one more time just to make sure that I get a full coverage with this. So I'm just going to gently press that down because I want to make sure that I get one time when I put on the embossing powder and I have the entire image complete. So I'm going to move that out of the way, and I'm going to use some gold embossing powder. This is the Brutus Monroe Gilded Gold Embossing Powder, and that's what I'm going to use on this image today. So I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of that on there and then tap off the rest of it onto just a scratch piece of paper. And look how beautiful that image is already. So like I said, it's a gorgeous image. It can stand alone and you don't even have to color it. But for today, we're going to watercolor. So I'm using a travel size brush as well as some of my zig markers. And I'm just going to put a really soft blend on this. But before I get started, I want to place this down on just a piece of cardboard. This is going to help my paper not bow as much and get warped because of the amount of water I'm going to use. So I'm just using some micropore tape, and I'm just going to tape this down. Now, in hindsight, I probably didn't need to do this because I'm going to be die cutting out this piece, but it's okay. It's going to just make sure that the flower image itself doesn't bow too much when I go ahead and add some of that water on there. So now I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to grab one of the lighter shades of pink, and I'm just coming in along the edge of my flowers. I don't want this flower to be really, really dark like the one I showed you earlier. I just want this to have a very light shade of pink. So I'm just doing some quick flicking motions just to put some of that around the outer edges of my image. Now I'm going to come in and just add a tiny bit of water just to smooth out some of that color. So I'm going to zoom in on this so you guys can actually see up close what I'm doing. So I'm just using a tiny bit of water and I'm blending out that ink. And look how soft that is. I just want a really, really soft color just along the edges, and I'm going to keep the majority of the center of my flower very, very light. Now using this, I'm not adding a lot of water, just a small amount of water, and I'm actually just dabbing it off on the side on a piece of paper just to make sure that I don't get my paper too wet. Now I'm just coming in around the edges and just filling in some of the edge parts of those petals just to make sure they're covered. Now I'm just going to smooth out everything, and that looks pretty good. Now I'm coming in with a green. Now this is a light green. It looks kind of stark right now, but as I add my water, it's going to really soften up this color. So as you can see, I did not use a lot of that marker. I just used a little bit and that went a long way. So I'm just going to use that in, just like I said, a tad bit of water. I don't want to use too much water. So you can see I'm just cleaning off my brush of any excess water I have. And then I can come back in and smooth out that green. So now that green is a lot softer and it doesn't seem to overpower my soft petals. So I had sped this up because it was taking me a little bit of time to do this. And if anybody's seen anybody color with zig markers before, I'm doing the same exact principle. So I'm just coming in and making sure everything is nice and light for right now. And then I'm going to come in and do the stem. Again, I'm just putting a little bit of brown down, just like a line or two, cleaning off my brush, and then I can go ahead and smooth that out. Now, once I have everything smoothed out and pretty much the way I want it, then I can go back in and start adding any shadows or any depth that I want to have. So I'm going to go back in with that pink marker, that light pink, and I'm being a little bit more heavy-handed here just to add some shadows to my flower, and I'm going to just very lightly blend those out. I'm not going to blend them out as much as I did around the petals, but I don't want it to be like really stark either. So that part right there looks good. But now I want to blend two colors. So I'm going to use a light pink and a medium pink just on a piece of acetate. I'm going to blend those two colors together and I'm going to add that to the center part of my flowers. Just along the center. So that color is a tad bit darker than the rest of my flower. So now to finish up the rest of it, I'm going to add some green, a light green and a dark green, and I'm going to blend those two colors together as well. And I'm going to add that into the center of my flowers, because sometimes when we look at a flower, we'll see the center of it and it might have a little bit of green in there. It might have a different color shade. So I'm just going to make sure I add a little bit of that to the center of my flowers, as well as adding just a little bit more of a shadow around my leaves. So I think that looks pretty good. I'm just going to come in lastly and add a little bit of a shadow right along the stem of my flower. Now I really like how this looks, so I'm going to stop right here and not go any further. Now I can go ahead and pull up my paper, and then I can remove the micropore tape or microcore tape, excuse me. And my paper is not really bowed because it was taped down to that cardboard piece. So I'm going to gently remove that off, and now I'm going to come in with the die. And this coordinating die works perfectly. Now, anytime you're doing this and you're using any kind of tape to hold down your dies in place, just make sure that you don't put it too far over on your colored image, because that paper is still a little bit damp. And if I put the tape directly on it, I could possibly tear what I just colored. And I definitely don't want to do that. So I'm just putting it right along the edges of the metal, and then I can run this through my die cut machine. Now that's die cut out, and now we're ready to place this down on a card. All right, so for my card base, I already scored a A2 card. So this is 5.5 by 4.25. And I'm going to put my image right there in the middle, but I just don't want it to be sitting on white. So I grab my Tattered Rose Distress Oxide ink, and I just want to add a little bit of this ink towards the center of the card, just so it has a little bit of a back color for my rose to sit on, or my dogwood to sit on. So I'm just going to grab a scratch piece of paper just to dab off any of that extra ink that I have, because I don't want to be heavy-handed with this. I just want almost like a little bit of a glow around the back of my flower. So I'm just dabbing that off and doing small circular motions just so I can get down some color. Now, once this is done, I'm just going to rub a little bit harder just to make sure I have the color set into my card. And now this is going to be a perfect little backdrop to put my flower. And it just really brings out some of the pink from the flower itself. Now I need to stamp a sentiment. I'm just grabbing one of the sentiments from the Dogwood flower stamp set, and I'm just making sure that when I add my flower, my sentiment will be tucked right underneath. So I went ahead and I stamped that down in Blackout ink from Ink on 3. And now I'm going to put a happy birthday right on top of that fabulous. Now, in order to make sure that I get this straight, because I could be a little bit off with this, I'm going to make sure that I use a ruler. My T ruler is perfect for this. So I'm just going to move that out the way, and then I'm going to bring in that T ruler. Now, the T ruler is going to help me to make sure that that happy birthday is straight on my card. This is just a great tip if you're just a little bit leery of like messing up your card at this stage. Grab yourself a ruler or grab yourself a straight edge just to make sure those smaller sentiments are lined up perfectly before you go ahead and stamp, because you know once you stamp you're pretty much done. So I'm just going to make sure I close my lid with that ruler in there, and then I can pick up those smaller sentiments, and now I know they're going to be straight. So I'm using that Blackout ink again, and I'm going to swing that door over and then stamp that down. And look how perfect that looks right on top of that fabulous. I'm going to stamp this one more time just to make sure I get a very dark sentiment, and that looks perfect. Now all I have to do is put together my card. So I'm grabbing some 3M foam tape, and I'm just placing it on the back part of my dogwood flowers just so I have a little bit of dimension on my card. So I'm going to pop that down with the stem right between the happy birthday. And of course, I wanted to add just a little bit more gold to this. So I am using some small gold sequins, just a few of them, and popping them up on my card. Now you can see this is such a soft and pretty card. Very, very feminine. And I love this because I know exactly who I'm going to be sending this card to. So I'm just going to grab one of my jewel pickers just to help me get some of these little gems into place, or these little sequins into place. So like I said, this stamp set is available right now in Ink on 3, and I'll make sure to put any shopping links below. And don't forget to use my affiliate links if you can, because that really helps me out. Okay, that is going to be the card for today. I want to thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. And don't forget to hit that bell so you guys know the next time I have a video up. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss a thing. If you also want to see some great cards for me, go ahead and check out my playlist. I will see you guys in another video soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.